Hi everyone, this is Mr. Axelrad again. And first off, want to say thank you to everyone for submitting your synthesis essay on homework that was due yesterday. Um, I do appreciate all the hard work that you all are putting in this summer, and it will be beneficial to you once we start up in class in the fall. So I'm talking to you today about the third essay that you're going to complete for me this summer, and that is the second type of essay that appears on the AP Language or Composition exam, and that is the analytical essay, which is also sometimes called the rhetorical analysis essay. Now, for this essay, what it asks you to do is it gives you a passage, which is down here for us, and it gives you a question right here. And what it's asking you to do is asking you to write an essay about the author's use of rhetorical strategies. In other words, you are expected to analyze how the passage conveys its meaning, achieves its purpose, or creates an effect. And your job as writers is to break the passage into its component parts in order to explain how the author put it together. Now, the first thing that you want to do with this type of essay is you want to read the question. Here's our question. Read the following passage published in the Sunday magazine of the New York Times, then write an essay in which you analyze how the structure of the passage and the use of language help convey the writer's views. So you've read the question, and you've thought about it. You want to read a question maybe 2 or 3 times to really understand what it's saying. And then what you want to do is, you want to try to put it into a simpler way of phrasing the question. And the simpler way that I've broken it down for us is, how does the way that this passage is written tell readers what the author's views are on the subject matter? So that's my simple question. So now, when I go in to read the passage, I have the question that's in a simpler way that I've written it. I have that front and center for me. Once you have written down the simpler way of phrasing the question, you want to then go in and read the passage. The passage isn't too long. It's just a couple of paragraphs. And this passage, as you'll see, is about a man writing about some of the differences between Eastern and Western cultures. So you read the passage, you want to underline it, make notes to yourself, things like that. So you read the passage at least twice. You really want to read these passages at least twice. Once you've read the passage, you want to try to identify the author's main point. And I'm giving you the author's main point here, but the author's main point is that the spiritual way of life has a side to it that Westerners don't know about. Okay? So we have our question, we have the author's main point. Now, your task as writers in this essay is to look for the author's rhetorical strategies or the author's use of language to explain how he shows readers that the spiritual way of life has a side to it that Westerners don't know about. Now, when you are writing this essay, you are free to look at any parts of the author's use of language that you think are necessary to help you with your thesis statement. So, for example, you can look at things like figurative language, you can look for metaphors, symbols, analogies, irony, imagery, etc. You can look at the author's use of diction, or the author's use of words and phrases. You can look at the author's use of syntax, or the way that words and phrases are arranged. And you can look at things like the author's tone and purpose. I know that in your 10th grade English class with Ms. Baiji, you had some writing assignments on the author's use of tone. I also know that you did a little bit of work with things like an author's use of ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos, to refresh your memory, is an author's appeal to ethics. Pathos is an author's appeal to emotion. and logos is an author's appeal to logic. So you can also write about an author's use of ethos, pathos, or logos, if you would like. So what I want to go through with you quickly is how one way of kind of breaking down this analytical essay, which I've done for us here. Again, this essay again can also be written using the basic 5-paragraph essay structure that you all are familiar with. There are more complex ways to write this essay, just as there are more complex ways to write the synthesis essay. And I'm going to be going over in class, starting in the fall, some of these more complex ways of writing these essays. But here I'm asking you to give this essay your best shot using the tools that you have coming in from 10th grade English. So I'm using this as a way to see what kind of coaching and instruction I need to give you all, to see what levels you all are at. But I really want you to use the tools that you have in your toolbox with the 5-paragraph essay format to tackle these essays, and then we're going to build on that from there once we get into class in the fall. So to begin with, you have an outline that I'm sort of walking you through here. You want to, again, start off with the author's main point, which is the spiritual way of life has a side to it that Westerners don't know about. The thesis statement then, which would come in the 5-paragraph essay structure, typically at the end of your introduction paragraph, could look something like this. Now, this is just an example that I'm giving to you, so don't just copy it directly. It's really just an example that I'm showing to you. You might say something like the author's tone, point of view, and diction reveal that while Westerners may have a romanticized view of Eastern cultures, these cultures are just as complex as those in the West. So again, author's tone, point of view, and diction are all different examples of rhetorical strategies that the author is using to prove his main point. So then from there, going through with the 5-paragraph essay structure, you might have one paragraph on tone, in which you would provide a description of the author's tone. Tone can be something like harsh, or sad, or nostalgic, etc. You would then want to provide a quote or an example from the text that reveals that author's tone. And then you would want to provide an explanation for how the tone of that quote helps to prove your thesis. You could have a paragraph on point of view, in which you would describe the author's point of view and maybe explain the implication of the author's point of view, or what the point of view what it means for this passage to be written by someone who is himself from an Eastern culture. You might want to provide a quote that reveals the author's point of view, and then you want to provide an explanation for how the author's point of view in this quote helps to prove your thesis. Next, you could have a potential paragraph on diction or word choice, and you would start off by addressing what you believe is a defining example of the author's word choice in this passage. This could mean repetition of a certain word or phrase, or an author's use of alliteration. Alliteration is the repetition of a sound at the beginning of closely connected words, such as when the author uses the phrase ridiculous romanticism. You then want to provide a quote that reveals an example of this type of word choice. And then you want to provide your explanation or your analysis for how the author's use of this type of word choice helps to prove your thesis. For your conclusion paragraph, there's a variety of possibilities that you could do. You could state your main point using the arguments you've made thus far. You could restate your main point and explain its broader significance, etc. So just what you typically do in a good conclusion paragraph. You could also make connections between your essay and current events going on in the world right now to sort of draw a broader implication from your essay, as many of you have already been doing in some of your essays. I also just wanted to point out to you that I've also given you some other tips for writing the rhetorical analysis paragraph. This guide here could be of use to you. I think there's some good tips in here that I've found, and especially if you're looking for more guidance on things like writing the introduction paragraph, of a rhetorical analysis essay and writing a sample body paragraph of a rhetorical analysis essay, this guide here has some good tips, and has a nice little sort of sample paragraph here for a sample body paragraph for the rhetorical analysis essay. This guide also has some good tips on stronger verbs to use when writing an analysis essay that can also be of help to you. It also has some guides for analyzing diction and some tips for analyzing syntax as well. So when you're writing this analysis essay, if you want to reference this guide for some more tips or some more guidance, I would suggest doing that as well. Here's some more tips for analyzing tone. One of the good things about taking a class like AP Language is that there is really an abundance of material that you could find on the internet to provide you with tips and strategies for writing the AP essay. Some of it's better than others, and one thing we're going to be looking at in class is, what are some of the better reference guides for guiding us in looking at the AP Language exam. I mentioned earlier that the Barron's AP Language Test Prep book is, I think, one of the best ones. There's also Cliff's Notes and things like that as well. But again, for our purposes here, I'm asking you to, right now, in the next week, to tackle the AP Language analytical essay. Again, try to do it in the time you have, 40 minutes. The due date is Tuesday, July 12th at 11:59 p.m. on Google Classroom. And that is it for now, everybody. As always, you can email me with any questions you have. I'm usually pretty fast about responding to questions through email. And yeah, that'll be it for now. I will look forward to reading your analytical essays, and I'm also, as you know, I'm currently grading your education essays. From there, I'll move on to your synthesis essays, and I'm going to keep making my way through these essays. As I mentioned in a Google Classroom announcement, all of this work for the summer does count for your grade when you get back to school in the fall. The short answer questions you completed for the education essays will count for credit or no credit, depending on whether or not you completed them. The multiple choice questions that you're going to answer as your last assignment for the summer will also count for credit or no credit, depending on whether or not you completed them. And the essays themselves, I'm grading according to the AP rubric, so that's why you're seeing your score is based on either 0 through 9. You can rewrite these for a higher grade if you would like once you get your grade. And as I also mentioned, I will not be weighting these essays as heavily as I will your assignments once you get back to school in the fall, simply because you're writing these essays without having received any direct instruction yet from me. So they count for a grade, but they're not weighted as heavily as the essays will be when you get back to school in the fall. So I hope that clears things up for people who had questions about that. Thank you, everyone, and I look forward to reading your next batch of essays. Have a great week.